Some people say they have nothing in common. Well, that's what makes this so interesting. This is the only thing that they all had in common. Being charming was one of Bundy's greatest assets, which allowed him to lure his victims into his car with ease. He was known for his good looks, charisma, and ability to make people feel at ease around him. And he used these traits to gain the trust of others, especially young women. But it wasn't just his appearance that made him so charming. It was also his demeanor and attitude. He was polite, respectful, and attentive, and he knew how to make people laugh. All of these traits made it easy for Bundy to get close to people and manipulate them into doing what he wanted. He could make anyone feel like the most important person in the room, and that's exactly what he did. Even though we know now that he was a serial killer, those who knew him were completely unaware of his dark side because he was so good at hiding it. Jeffrey Dahmer was a very private person. He kept to himself and didn't talk much, but when he did speak, he had a way of making people feel at ease. Despite his quiet nature, he had a sense of humor that people found amusing, and he was always willing to lend a helping hand. He was also very polite and respectful towards others. He was patient and understood that everyone has their own struggles. He never judged anyone and was always willing to listen without offering unsolicited advice. This made him a reliable and trustworthy friend and confidant. Although Jeffrey Dahmer was initially seen as a nice guy, his true colors eventually came out. His polite and friendly demeanor hid a dark secret. Behind closed doors, he was a monster. John Wayne Gacy had a variety of facial expressions that could be described as eerie and creepy, which may have contributed to his nickname, the Killer Clown. For example, he would often appear goofy and make silly faces while wearing a clown costume. He would also stare blankly into space with a vacant expression on his face. Additionally, he had a habit of cracking his knuckles and twitching his eyebrows in a way that many people found unsettling. In addition to his strange facial expressions, Gacy also had some other creepy characteristics. He was known for being uncomfortably close with young men and boys, which made many people uncomfortable. Moreover, he had a strange obsession with clowns, which he used to disguise himself while committing his heinous crimes. While there is no evidence that Gacy's facial expressions were intentional attempts to intimidate or scare people, many witnesses reported finding them disturbing and creepy. These unsettling characteristics ultimately became part of his infamous persona as the Killer Clown. Kohberger had a certain charm about him that made him likable and approachable. He was a skilled communicator and was able to make people feel comfortable around him, even during stressful situations. One of Kolb's most notable traits was his disarming smile. People who met him felt an instant connection and couldn't help but feel drawn to him. However, there was something unsettling about his eyes, a coldness that seemed to stare straight through you. There was something hidden behind that charming facade. Kolb was able to convince people of things that were not true by being charismatic and confident. People believed him because he had a way of making them see what he wanted them to see. He was a master manipulator and could easily gain someone's trust by being friendly and open. All of these men had one thing in common. They were all successful con artists. They were able to build trust and rapport with potential victims, allowing them to manipulate them into doing what they wanted. This was the key to their success as con artists, and it also made them seem more likable and trustworthy than they actually were. Ted Bundy was a handsome man with an athletic build and a charming personality. He was intelligent and articulate, and he used his charisma to manipulate people into doing what he wanted. Bundy was also very organized and methodical in his approach to life, which helped him to plan his crimes and evade the police for so long. He was able to maintain a facade of being a normal, well-adjusted person while secretly planning and carrying out his horrific murders. Bundy's physical attractiveness and charming personality made him all the more dangerous, as it allowed him to gain the trust of his potential victims. Women in particular were drawn to his good looks and charisma, and he used this to his advantage when planning his attacks. Jeffrey Dahmer was an average-looking man who was often overlooked and underestimated. He was not particularly muscular or athletic, nor did he have any striking physical features. He was of medium height and build and generally blended in with the crowd. However, what Dahmer lacked in physical attributes he made up for in terms of intelligence and cunning. He was a highly intelligent individual who was able to use his knowledge to manipulate and control others. Dahmer was also very observant and was able to pick up on small details about people that he could later use to his advantage. He was also incredibly patient and was willing to wait for extended periods of time in order to achieve his goals. John Wayne Gacy grew up in a broken home and had a difficult childhood. His parents were constantly fighting and his father was abusive towards both his wife and children. Gacy also had an older brother who was involved in criminal activities, which may have influenced Gacy's own behavior. As a result of his difficult childhood, Gacy had a troubled adolescence and was often in trouble with the law. He was arrested several times for minor offenses such as burglary and car theft. Despite his troubled past, Gacy was able to build a successful career as a construction worker and married twice. However, his criminal tendencies continued into adulthood, and he eventually became one of the most notorious serial killers in American history. Kohberger's childhood was far from ordinary. Growing up in a small town in Pennsylvania, he was known as the odd kid by his peers. He was considered to be a bit of a loner and was often seen as strange and creepy. Despite being an honor student throughout high school, Kohberger was involved in a number of unusual activities, including a stint as a volunteer firefighter and a fascination with taxidermy. This odd behavior only added to the mystery surrounding him and left many people wondering what was going on in his mind. When he moved to Washington State to attend graduate school, the rumors about him followed him. Some of his classmates and professors described him as being odd and creepy, and many people were put off by his unsettling demeanor. Despite this, Kohberger continued to pursue his studies and eventually became a suspect in the brutal murders of 4 University of Idaho students. The contrast between his seemingly normal academic career and his alleged involvement in such horrific crimes has only served to make him more enigmatic and mysterious. Ted Bundy had a strict and sometimes cruel upbringing. His mother was emotionally distant and often left Bundy in the care of other relatives, which resulted in a lack of stability and affection during his early years. Bundy's adoptive parents were strict disciplinarians, and he was often punished harshly for minor infractions. He was also frequently bullied by his peers, which made him feel isolated and angry. These early experiences left Bundy with a deep sense of resentment and a desire for power and control, which manifested itself in his later crimes. Jeffrey Dahmer's childhood was marked by a series of traumatic events that had a profound impact on his development. At the age of 4, his family moved to a new home, which meant leaving behind his only friend and having to start over in a new school. Shortly after the move, his father, who had been abusive towards his wife, left the family, leaving them with little financial support. When Jeffrey was 8 years old, his mother began dating a man named Frank, who eventually became a stepfather to Jeffrey. Unfortunately, Frank turned out to be abusive and manipulative, further traumatizing young Jeffrey. In addition to the emotional abuse, Jeffrey also suffered physical abuse at the hands of his stepfather, which caused him to become withdrawn and isolated. By the time he reached high school, Jeffrey was already showing signs of severe mental illness, such as hearing voices and seeing visions. Despite this, he was still able to graduate from high school and enroll in college, where he eventually dropped out to work in a brewery. It was during this time that he began to experiment with alcohol and drugs, which only exacerbated his mental health issues and led him down a path of violence and murder. John Wayne Gacy's behavior as an adult was often erratic and unpredictable, which made him appear strange and unsettling to those around him. For example, he had a strange habit of pacing back and forth for hours on end, which some people found to be creepy and unnerving. Additionally, Gacy was known for his sudden mood swings, which could take him from being jovial and friendly to angry and violent in a matter of moments. This unpredictability made him appear unstable and dangerous. Furthermore, Gacy's behavior was often inappropriate and bizarre. He had a habit of staring blankly into space for long periods of time, which made him seem disconnected from reality. He also had a strange obsession with clowns, which he used to disguise himself while committing his heinous crimes. Overall, Gacy's behavior was so strange and unsettling that many people found him to be creepy and disturbing. Brian Colbert's behavior was often strange and unsettling, which made him appear creepy to those who knew him. For example, he had a habit of fixating on certain individuals and then stalking them, which made many people feel uncomfortable and unsafe. Additionally, Kalb had a tendency to disappear for long periods of time without any explanation, which only added to his mysterious and eerie reputation. Furthermore, Kalb's behavior was often inappropriate and bizarre. He was known for engaging in odd and random acts of violence, which seemed to come out of nowhere and shocked those around him. For example, he was caught on camera performing strange rituals and making bizarre facial expressions, which many people found to be creepy and disturbing. Overall, Kohberger's behavior was so strange and unsettling that many people were afraid of him and felt that there was something sinister lurking beneath his surface. These are just a few of the similarities between these serial killers. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe for more content.